When we talk about shamanism, we can compare traditional shamanism with what has been come to be known as Neo Shamanism. There's also Core Shamanism. But there are some differences between them and some controversies as well. So let's have a look at that today. Alright, welcome back to my channel. I'm Lee Johnson. If this is your first time here, please, and you like my content of course, please do all the usual stuff, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and if you want to really support the channel, you can hit the join button. Alright, so traditional shamanism versus neo-shamanism or core shamanism or whatever term we're looking at. Now, when we consider traditional shamanism, that would really be somebody who has trained, and I would also go as far as to say live with a traditional shamanic tribe or people. I mean, you get a lot of people who do go around the world and they study and learn with traditional shamans. And then they come back to the Western world and basically commercialize the whole thing. And sometimes to the extreme where it becomes practically impossible for anybody else to get the knowledge. But I would say in terms of being a traditional shaman, it would be somebody who is completely immersed in that world and lives with those people, with that community. And that can be very rural community, quite often secluded, but you know, we being in the Western world, we generally don't see this. We may get people, as I said, who trained with traditional shamans, but whether we can consider them to be traditional shamans themselves, I don't really know. This is actually a very difficult topic to discuss because there are so many different viewpoints and perspectives on this. If we look at Michael Harner, who coined the phrase core shamanism, for instance, he studied with actual Native American tribes and actual Native American shamans, and then he brought it back into the Western world and created core shamanism. And by core shamanism, we're really referring to shamanic techniques and practices which have been pulled out of these traditional shamanic tribes. And I'm not sure if we can say meshed together. They work. It's not so much more eclectic as it is more syncretic, but it does break away from that traditional basis in some form or fashion. It has been brought into a Western society, and because of this, a lot of people scream about cultural appropriation. Now, the difficulty we find here again is based on different viewpoints, different perspectives, and how people consider things like shamanism to actually work. You'll get, you know, a lot of these practices are pulled out of Native American shamanic techniques and from the shamans themselves. And because of that, a lot of Native American people are shouting about cultural appropriation, which I can completely understand. However, there are a lot of Native Americans who state that these techniques and practices themselves of shamanism are or should be brought to everybody, because they are techniques and practices which don't only heal people, but they heal the planet, and we need to heal the planet, and we need to do that as a collective, as a whole. Therefore, you have one camp which is saying, take it, bring it into make it universal, make it international. Then you have another camp which says that it's cultural appropriation, which in a sense it is. So it's very difficult to figure out which is which. But Neo Shamanism itself, and when I say Neo Shamanism, I mean a modern practice of shamanism which is westernized. We have people like Castaneda, who helped start this whole neo-shamanic movement. And we also have, I believe it's pronounced Mircea Eliade, from 1950s, early 1950s, who wrote Shamanism, Archaic Techniques of Ecstasy. You know, these people were considered to really start the neo-shamanic movement. But these were archaeologists from a Western society who went into native cultures, native tribes, native traditions, and, you know, really picked them to pieces and wrote about them and studied them as all anthropologists. So, I mean, a lot of people will say they weren't exactly respectful of these cultures and traditions. But we have in our society and world today a form of shamanism which is westernized. And this we can call Neo Shamanism, or if you want to, you can call it Core Shamanism. Now, the big differences between traditional shamanism and Core Shamanism or Neo Shamanism, the traditional shaman would be, as I mentioned in previous video, really be the village doctor. They didn't just journey to the other worlds and talk to the spirits and bring messages back. They also set bones. They healed people through herbs, medicines. They were midwives. They delivered babies. They really encompassed a lot of different practices. Whereas with Core Shamanism, because we're in a Western society, we obviously have our doctors who specialize in those particular areas. So with Core Shamanism, Neo Shamanism, we are focused more on the actual journey work, on the healing through spirit and things like that. There's also a case of traditional shamans using entheogens. In Neo Shamanism, there's a bit of a debate about this. So some will say that entheogens are useful and necessary. Others will say completely unnecessary, don't need them. I don't use them myself, and I have success. So I do feel that if entheogens are not used properly, they can be harmful. They can actually cause more harm than good. And if they are not, if you don't have a proper guide, let's put it that way, to actually take you through a journey using entheogens, then you can end up in places that you shouldn't be, don't want to be, and experiences that are fleeting. If you don't use the entheogens, you find ways to get there without, the use of drugs and plants. A lot of people are using DMT and things like that nowadays. Anyway, I don't want to get into that really. So we have this whole issue of neo-shamanism being cultural appropriation. Some say it is, some say it isn't, some say it should be spread widely. The difficulty, again, comes in that when we talk about shaman and shamanism, the word is usually noted as originating from the Tungus language, Siberia and things like that. But if we actually look into the etymology of the word shaman, there are variations that are found in lots of different cultures. So again, we find that some people will say that the word shaman should not be used outside the original place that the place that it originated from. So even a Native American using the word shaman should not be using the word shaman. It's really, really difficult to try and please everybody, and to try and find a way around, these using certain terms and terminologies that describe a particular thing and describe a particular practice. And I think when it comes to the word shaman and shamanism, there's a lot of focus towards the Native American use of the techniques. And even there, shamanism is found in all cultures that work with a spirit world. In traditional shaman, the main focus is actually that non-physical, that spiritual world. Whereas in Neo Shamanism, it's more of an overlap between our two realities. But that's where the traditional shaman lives, in that spirit world. So there's again a difference there, but probably because, living in a Western society, we have to operate in a Western society. So we do need to obviously consider the physical realm and the spirit realm, and overlap them and bring them together and work with them interchangeably. We can't stay in the spirit realm, we can't just live there, because we need to function. So it's a case of bringing old techniques into a modern framework and trying to use them, and also be respectful. That's the main thing, is be respectful of the practices you're actually learning and you're actually using. Understand where they came from. Understand the cultures that they came from, and the struggles and the pains that they went through, and then go forward from there. But when we, as I said, the main focus seems to be shamanism is Native American, but it's not. Shamanism is found in every culture. Gershon Winkler is a Jew, a rabbi, and he is a shaman. He's considered to be a shaman. We have people like Evelyn Riesdeck, who has studied with lots of different traditional shamans all over the world from different cultures. And she is writing about Norse shamanism. We also find Celtic shamanism. We find the Sangoma in South Africa, where I am, who is considered a shaman, who uses shamanic techniques. There are a lot of people who, I wouldn't say a lot, I do know of at least one that I've read about, who studied with a lot of Native American shamans and is American, and came to South Africa to study with a Sangoma and learn those techniques. So, when you've got this mishmash of cultures coming together and being brought into one place and used by one person, we can no longer say it's traditional shamanism, or it's a traditional practice. It is a syncretic absorption of different cultures and different techniques into something which is new, which is why it's called Neo Shamanism. But I think the biggest issue which we find is that a lot of people are studying traditional ways, bringing it into a Western society and commercializing it. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't find anything wrong with that. I think, we discussed the Working Witch in the Black Hat Chat a couple of weeks ago, or a few weeks ago. And when we give teaching or we give a service, there needs to be an energy exchange. So somebody living in a Western society, in that case, that energy exchange is usually money. It's the easiest way to actually, provide that service, and provide a way to actually create that energy exchange without confusing everybody. So when we provide a service or we provide teaching, then we get paid for that service or teaching. However, there are some people who are just going way overboard. They are making it impossible for your normal everyday person to go and get these teachings, because the prices are ridiculous. Some of the courses I've seen on shamanism, which maybe a 5-day workshop, is $400 to $1,000. A lot of these workshops do have retreats. You go there, you live there for 5 days, you eat the food and everything else. So sure, got to cover those expenses as well. But you know, even online courses, some of them are just absolutely ridiculously priced and way out of anybody's price range. So although I do agree with the people who say that these practices should be made universal, international, because they are practices which are used to heal our planet as well as the people on the planet. You know, providing books or courses which are reasonably priced, and you don't have to mortgage your house to just learn something new. You know, that's reasonable. And of course, the other way of learning shamanism is with spirit itself. So you can learn some basics from books and stuff, and then actually sit down and interact with spirit and let spirit teach you. That's probably the best way to actually learn the whole thing. But in that case, you're not learning traditional shamanism or neo-shamanism. It then becomes a creation of your own. So where do we put that in the whole, you know, cultural appropriation? This belongs to that culture and that person. You can't, because you're being taught by spirit, which is completely unique to you. But then we get the issue of, well, then you didn't learn it from somebody valid, and therefore your practice is not valid. The debates just go on and on and on. The only way to overcome this is to take the methods you learn, apply them. If they work and enough people can vouch for that, then you've got a valid practice. So, you know, there are so many different ways to look at these things, and so many different people to look at them and have their own perspectives and viewpoints and opinions. To try and appease everybody, it just becomes impossible. So if I've offended anybody, I am very sorry. But this is my practice, and I've been taught mostly by spirit. So, you know, if it works, it works. Nothing else to say about it, really. Anyway, I think I've rambled on enough about this today. So, you know, give me your opinions in the comments. I'd love to hear from you and see how you feel about the whole neo-shaman versus traditional shaman, and whether it is cultural appropriation, whether it isn't. You know, love to hear your opinions. Give me a shout, and I will see you next week. Thanks. Cheers.